listener production.
Hello, Natarsha Belling with you and welcome to the afternoon edition of The Briefing. In our deep dive this afternoon, we'll take a closer look at the latest on King Charles as the Monarch is hospitalised with side effects from his ongoing cancer treatment. We'll chat with royal expert Angela Mollard about exactly what's going on and what plans are in place as concerns grow over the King's health. But first, let's check the afternoon headlines this Friday, the 28th of March. It's on day one of the election campaign and both the Prime Minister and Liberal leader are on the attack. The latest news poll from Redbridge shows Peter Dutton is now in the lead, with voters concerned about the cost of living crisis, saying they are worse off now under the Albanese government than they were 3 years ago. Mr Albanese called the election for the 3rd of May earlier this morning with a key focus on tax cuts and strengthening Medicare.
This is a time for building on our nation's strengths, building our security and prosperity for ourselves, building an Australia where no one is held back and no one is left behind.
Mr Dutton has hit the campaign trail in his home state of Queensland, promising cheaper energy prices, saying he wants to build a stronger, safer Australia.
We can't afford 3 more years like the last 3. There is a better way for our country, and my team and I have a practical plan which will deliver cost of living relief.
The ex-police officer who tasered a 95-year-old great-grandmother in an aged care facility will not be sent to jail. Christian White's been handed a 2-year community corrections order for the death of Claire Nowland and must also complete 425 hours of community service. The judge described White's actions in tasering Mrs Nowland as a terrible mistake despite prosecutors pushing hard for prison time. And 2 students have been seriously injured after being hit by an out-of-control car that was allegedly stolen. Police allege the vehicle was taken from outside a childcare centre with an 8-year-old girl inside in Canberra. The driver of the vehicle has been arrested. Now it's time to get into our deep dive with royal expert Angela Mollard on the latest concerning developments with the health of King Charles. The Monarch has been admitted to hospital with the new health setback prompting many royal watchers to question what's really going on with the King's battle with cancer and what's next if his condition continues to worsen. Ange, thanks so much for joining us. Really extraordinary announcement from Buckingham Palace this morning, our time, that King Charles has been in hospital because of side effects from ongoing cancer treatment. Exactly what do we know?
So that, as you say, Tash, the palace has put out a statement saying that following his usual medical treatment that the King had experienced some temporary side effects and that required a short period of observation in hospital. His afternoon engagements were postponed and, in fact, the next day, his 4 engagements in Birmingham, so a couple of hours north of London, they were cancelled as well. Now, the significance of this is that we're getting updates on the King's medical condition in a way that we haven't really seen with the royal family before. Similarly with Kate, she gave regular updates to how she was going on her cancer journey. We know, of course, that the King is still having weekly treatment for cancer. So the fact that we get this sort of detail is interesting. And actually, there is a reason why they are being so transparent.
And what is that reason? I presume it's because there was a lot of controversy over details regarding the late Queen Elizabeth II's health, correct?
That's right. So we didn't used to hear very much about the Queen's health. She very rarely was in hospital, but on one occasion she was taken to hospital. The palace didn't speak about that. They didn't make any note about it. Journalists found out she had been in hospital, and the relationship between the palace and the press was deeply harmed by that experience because there is an understanding that there will be a level of transparency. Of course, you cannot speak about somebody's specific medical condition, and that's the reason why King Charles hasn't been specific about what type of cancer he has, nor, of course, was Kate specific about that. But the fact that he was in hospital, that situation in the past will very much have informed this decision by the palace, even though this is apparently very routine to have a response like this to some elements of treatment. They've been very transparent about the fact that he has been in hospital. They don't want to have that situation happen again, as happened with the late Queen. It's not good for the palace reputation to be concealing the condition of the monarch. So I think in this case, they're making sure that they get ahead of the narrative.
Okay, you make a great point there, Ange. We don't have a right to know someone's personal medical details or their personal medical history or what's going on with them. But it's really interesting that I think a lot of us have forgotten that the King is continuing to battle cancer. And this has reminded us yet again that he isn't well. How unwell do you think King Charles is?
Look, I'm not a medic, but I think the fact that he has been treated for cancer for over a year now suggests that this is an ongoing condition, that there's certainly not any of the talk that we've had around Kate's cancer about her being healed from cancer, her being in remission from cancer. Those messages have not come out from the palace in regards to the King's cancer. Now, for an older man with cancer, of course, as I say, I'm not a medic, but the understanding around that is that it could be a more permanent cancer. It could be a cancer that he's living with rather than a cancer that he's going to be cured from. Now, of course, that has huge ramifications for the monarchy because, of course, he's only come to the crown in the last couple of years. He's waited his whole life to take on this role. And I think, Tash, that's why we're seeing him work so hard. He's a renowned workaholic anyway, but having finally got the top job, he's had this experience of cancer. He's not letting it get in the way of his reign. He wants his reign to stand for something. And if that's going to be a curtailed reign, because, of course, he potentially has a terminal illness, then he wants it to matter. I think what's also really interesting about the fact that we haven't had any indication that there's a cure or that he's improving, perhaps, is that this will, of course, have huge ramifications for William and Kate, because if they're thinking that they are going to come to the throne far earlier than they expect, William and Kate, of course, want their children to grow up before they have to take that top job together. So, in terms of those watching the royal family and looking how it goes forward, this is one of the things that happens. You've got a 76-year-old monarch. That means that it's very natural for there to be medical issues and potentially conditions that may curtail someone's life.
And of course, we wish the King all the best, but you did mention this has massive ramifications. He's waited his whole life to step into his mother's shoes, and we knew that Queen Elizabeth II had an extraordinary reign that had never been seen before in history. But if he continues to deteriorate health-wise, will there be a scenario, do you think, that he abdicates first?
Look, we've not seen that apart from, of course, Edward and Mrs. Simpson. Their abdication was for different reasons. It was because he wanted to have a relationship with the divorcee. And we haven't really talked a lot about abdication until the Queen of Denmark, of course, abdicated so that King Frederick and our own Princess Mary became king and queen. There may have been some other reasons behind that. Of course, she had health reasons. She also probably wanted to draw focus away from
a couple of controversies.
Speculation that had gone on around Prince Frederick late night activities in Spain. So I think there was a lot of reasons there for her to abdicate. Look, it's not something we expect of British royalty. There's no real precedent for it. As I say, I wouldn't expect the king to abdicate unless he was hugely unwell.
In regards to if he doesn't abdicate, and as you said, he is known as a workaholic. A lot of people have commented over the last 24 hours or so since this announcement about the king being admitted to hospital, have questioned his work ethic and said he needs to tailor back or wind back some of his ongoing commitments. If his health does worsen though, Ange, what is the plan moving forward? Because as I mentioned before, we were used to Queen Elizabeth II for decades. What is the plan moving forward or the strategies from a monarch if King Charles does unfortunately pass away? What happens? That goes straight to wills, he becomes king, and then Kate is queen, correct?
That's right. Look, just before that, there are a series of adjacent royals who are nominated to support the king in a situation where he may be incapacitated. And there's usually 4 or 5 of them. That changed when Harry moved to, he was one of them, and that changed when he moved to America. I think Princess Beatrice is one of them, and there's a series of close-knit family members who are around him in the event that he's incapacitated and unable to reign. But yes, as you say, it would immediately, as we saw when the Queen died, fall to William. He will be King William the second that his father dies. Now, no, we're not suggesting that Charles is terminally ill or that that is imminent at any stretch. We're not saying that at all. But we have to think about it just in the same way that this was being discussed when the late Queen was getting on in age. I think the fact that we know about Charles's illness in a way that we didn't know about the late Queen's health until the very end. I mean, we of course saw her just a couple of days before her death with the then British Prime Minister Liz Truss. So it was, we weren't really prepared for it. I think the interesting thing this time around is that there's a lot of people, particularly in Britain, who are on tenterhooks thinking, how serious is that? And as we go into the second year of him still being treated for cancer, it does beg a lot of questions as to how things will unfold in the coming months, hopefully years.
So, and in regards, you mentioned earlier the fact that there is possibly a role for Harry. Everyone would question, considering what's happened with the fractured relationship between Prince William and Prince Harry, that would Harry and Meghan have a place at the, say, for example, the royal decision-making table if King Charles does pass away?
I would say at this stage, not at all. They have chosen to step away from the royal family. Of course, Harry is still in the line of succession, but he's behind George and Charlotte and Louis. So he's moved back considerably. What would be interesting, Tash, is whether or not the king's potentially, as he gets closer to death, if he were to become, to be incapacitated or in a terminal situation, what that might mean for the relationship. Because, of course, it's in those times of strife that people come together. We didn't see them come together when the Queen died. Of course, Harry went up to Balmoral quite separately from his brother. They weren't on the same plane. They didn't cross paths. But a father is different. It's one step removed. And Harry, of course, has as much right as William does to the proceedings that would naturally unfold should his father become ill and incapacitated and die. Of course, Camilla has a key role in this as his spouse as well, but William in terms of the law of succession. But we do know there is a full plan in place for every monarch's death, whether that be something that happened in a shocking way or whether it was a slow decline. That is always in place, which is why they can sort of fall into motion very quickly. But in terms of William and Harry, it will be interesting to see where their relationship is at that stage. What's really interesting is that Harry hasn't spoken out about his family in a negative way for quite a number of months now. And I think that's very deliberate. He's focusing on his work. We know that he had a very short meeting with his father when he was in London, when he was first diagnosed with cancer. The following time he was in London, they didn't get together. So there's no indication that the father and son relationship has repaired, but we don't know what's going on behind the scenes. I think that if Harry and Charles were in communication, we would not know about it at the moment, because Harry knows that were he to leak that they had been in communication, that would be the worst thing possible for their growing new relationship. So I think there's every possibility that father and son are in contact, but we just don't know about it. But as to how William and Harry, how that relationship might evolve should the king's health decline further, I think that's going to be one of the most interesting things that we'll witness in terms of the royal family going forward.
Indeed. We appreciate your analysis as always, Ange. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Tash.
That was royal expert Angela Mollard. And we'll be back tomorrow with the weekend briefing. And on tomorrow's ep, Antoinette is joined by Conrad Mikowski, better known as Punter's Politics.
The reason why I get every single day a punter come up to me, I shake my hand, oh mate, yeah, bloody great stuff, really good. Oh, I know we're getting scammed. And they know it. We know it. We all know we're getting scammed because something's not quite working. We can't afford what we used to be able to afford. Houses are getting ridiculous. We know something's going on. And all I'm doing is saying, you are correct. It is a scam.
We'd love you to subscribe or follow us so you don't miss our episodes or our deep dive of the day. You can also follow us on our socials on Instagram at The Briefing Podcast and on TikTok and YouTube. You just need to search Listener Newsroom. That's spelled LISTNR. I'm Natarsha Belling. Thanks so much for your company. Have a lovely weekend.